Missouri Library, one of our members, Dennis Okerstrom, thank you, had a program promoting his book, Project 9, Air Commandos. Who attended that, just out of curiosity? Okay. Well, the program was taped and on C-SPAN, and I recently put that on a thumb drive, and I'm thinking if you have an interest, we could replay that. The important, not the important part, but one of the things, Colonel Rick Cole, who was Jimmy Doolittle's co-pilot, was one of the 3 participants in that. So it's it looks like to be an interesting book. So we'll stay tuned to that. Today we had the pleasure of having Lieutenant Colonel Michael Harris, U.S. Air Force retired. He goes by Chino. Mike is an Air Force veteran, served 1982 to 2002, got those 20 years in. He's a master navigator, 2,700 flying hours. Started out as a B-52 electronic warfare officer, and then went on to be a B-1B warfare systems officer. You know, he sent me his bio, and believe me, this guy graduated college, Ohio University, fooled around for a year or 2, I noticed, before he got serious. And then joined the Air Force, went to OCS, and worked his way up through the B-52s and the B-1s. At one point in his career, he was the commander of the 320th Basic Training Unit at Lackland Air Force Base. Finished up at OFFUTT and as USSTRACTCOM Strategy Concept Officer. He holds a master's degree in a Master's of Science degree from Emory, Riddle, and his hobby, which I'm going to ask him to share a little bit, is extreme hiking. I emailed him, I said, did you ever hike the Grand Canyon? And he said, yeah. He said, right after college, he says, one day I hiked down to the river and then I hiked back in the same day. And if you've ever been on the river, the Grand Canyon, it is an awesome. But more importantly, he hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, which is 2,200 miles twice. So, man, he's got some different. And then he had a second career. But Mike, by the way, I want to thank John English, the gentleman lives in Lawrence, and John contacted him, and we're happy to have him. Come forward, Mike.
Yeah, well, you can cut them now so you can see the slides. I want to thank Ron for the nice introduction, and thanks for John for coordinating everything. I tell you, I love to be in this place talking to people that love aviation. I see that old Strategic Air Command cap there, Cobra Ball. I was in Sect for most of my career. I love it. Another thing, you know, I've never seen this many colonels in one room since I was a young major stationed at the Pentagon. This is unbelievable. You know, so I salute all of you. People always ask me, how did I get this call sign of Chino? All the Air Force aviators have a call sign, and when I was a single young second lieutenant, I was going through electronic warfare training in Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, California. And I was up probably in Reno or Tahoe, you know, doing what a single guy does. And unfortunately, at the same time, down in Chino, California, some guy mass murdered a bunch of people. So my classmates, of course, assumed it was me. Of course, it wasn't me. But I became Chino Mike, the mass murderer, then Chino Mike. And when I got to the Pentagon, believe it or not, there were 17 Mike Harrises in the phone book. All worked in the Pentagon. So till the day I retired, my official signature was Chino. So I go by Chino. Today I'm not going to talk about my career, but I'm going to focus on the B-1. I was lucky enough to be one of the very first people selected. I was the initial cadre of guys that flew the B-1, and I'll tell you some of my experiences about that. And then at the end we're going to have about a 9-minute video, and then I want to open it up for some questions. I'm getting old. I got to get my glasses. Sorry. All right, first of all, if you asked me a year ago to talk to you, this is what I would look like. This was my last day of my 2,185.9 mile hike from Georgia to Maine in 14 states. And this is the hardest day of the entire trail. It's over a mile-high mountain in northern Maine, Mount Katahdin. And so that's what I would have looked like. I'm one of the few people in the world that has done it twice. I did it the first time when I was 46, and then last year when I was 54. And 7 years from now, I want to do it one more time in my 60s. That's my goal. It was a lot of fun going through 14 states. It's the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest 17 times. And it's thank you, it's very difficult. With about 200 miles to go, I took a bad fall on the top of a mountain in Maine, broke or cracked about 4 or 5 ribs on the left side, and let's just say the last 200 miles was very, very challenging. But I survived. My first assignment when I was in Guam, great assignment, got to travel all over, as an electronic warfare officer in a B-52G model. And maybe you don't know this, but in the B-52G, as far as I know, it's the only, back then, it's the only airplane that has 3 fully qualified and trained navigators on it. You know, nowadays they don't even really go through navigator training. You know, we used to have to go back, we used to have to shoot celestial. You know, we could navigate at night through the stars and by the sun through the day, and you actually put a sextant out of the top of a B-52. And trust me, on Guam, going over that Pacific Ocean, we were shooting celestial all the time. So we had 3 navigators on board. One was the radar navigator who dropped the bombs. One was the regular navigator. They sat down in the hole, in the dark. And then upstairs, in the dark, facing backwards, is the electronic warfare officer and the gunner. So I've got 1,000 hours flying backwards. So it was kind of hard. When I was coming out of, right before I got my wings, my flight instructor wanted me to fly F-4s. And I thought, man, cool, F-4s, that sounds pretty neat. But I knew F-4s were going away, and I said, you know, that B-1's coming up pretty soon. So I took a gamble. I took a B-52, and sure enough, as a first lieutenant, I was like one of 4 guys to be selected as first lieutenant to find a brand new B-1 bomber. And I got to tell you, I am glad that I did it. I picked up, I don't know for sure, 3 or 4 airplanes from the factory floor in Palmdale, California. One of them had only 14 hours on it. Amazing. I can't even describe. You know, I think low level in a B-52, we flew 400 feet at, I don't know, 340 indicated, I think. Well, we train in a B-1 low level at 550. And that's not even supersonic. You know, you stroke those afterburners. I've seen one time with some heavy winds doing some fighter exercises up in North Dakota. I saw a ground speed of 837 was the highest ground speed I saw. It was pretty awesome. So I was lucky enough to reactivate, be part of the reactivation of the 37th Bombardment Squadron in Rapid City, South Dakota. The video they'll show a little bit about the 37th. It was a great outfit. When I first started flying the airplane, I was a defensive systems officer. That means I would protect the airplane electronically and through chaff and flares. And then unfortunately, or fortunately for me, but unfortunately, we had a couple crashes. And whoever designed the plane, they didn't design it quite right because they had these instructor seats that folded down, one between the pilots, one between the back seat guys. Well, here's their plan. You're flying 400 feet at 600 miles an hour, and if you have to get these guys out, guess what you do? You start a zoom maneuver, they get out of their seats, they put their parachutes on, they eject the ladder, and they roll out of the airplane. Okay, at 400 feet, you're about 2 seconds from crashing. So we had a couple guys in these instructor seats that died. So they said, hey, we have to have everybody in the front and the back dual qualified, which is great for me because now I'm not just a defensive systems guy, I'm an offensive systems guy. So I'm dropping the bombs, doing all the navigation, doing the air refueling, rendezvous. It was great. And later on in my career, when I was down at the schoolhouse in Abilene, Texas, where I first got to know the, at the time, the Confederate Air Force guys out of Midland, I would sit in my seat, do my job, while I'm training a brand new guy in the other seat, or vice versa. So it was kind of difficult because 2 guys are totally unqualified and 2 guys are totally qualified, and you're flying 400 feet low level in terrain following. So it was quite a challenge, but excellent airplane. And this is just to give you an idea. You know, the B-52, we had 6 crew members. The B-1 is 2/3 the size of a B-52, has 4 crew members, 2 pilots, an offensive and a defensive systems officer, which we call weapons systems officers. And like I said, 1.2, a little over 1.2 Mach. Swept wing aircraft, so we brought in a lot of F-111 guys at first because they were familiar with swept wing technology, but a pretty awesome airplane. All right, this airplane is, I'm not kidding, like a giant fighter. We used to do these things called Captain Atomics. We'd do a touch and go, and we'd bring the nose up and cut it way down and do some pretty good shows. And then we used to follow, for 2 air shows, we followed the Thunderbirds in, and the Thunderbirds requested that the B-1 never follow them in an air show anymore. We're 477,000 pounds max, and you know, we can do some awesome maneuvers. I got to tell you a quick story. I was telling everybody has a call sign. Well, our crew was picked to fly with a 4-star general from France, head of the strategic forces. This guy could say maybe 7 words English, okay? So we couldn't put him in an instructor seat because they didn't exist anymore, so we flew him in the co-pilot seat, right? And out of Rapid City, South Dakota, we were flying over the Bighorn Mountains, terrain following 400 feet. Really a cool ride. I mean, awesome, you know? We're hugging the mountains at 400 feet, and we're coming out of low level, and we're screaming up to our altitude, and our pilot, and I won't mention his name right now, he decides, just like all the time, when you get up to altitude, you just roll your nose over a little bit, you kill the altitude. Well, you know what he does? He does an illegal full roll. We're in the back, our attitude indicators, right? You know, we're high-fiving each other, you know. Hey, great, you know. And so we're telling this general on the way home, who doesn't speak English, okay, this is illegal. Okay, no, this is bad. This is bad. You know, don't mention anything. This is bad. Well, I guess the general comes. He would get him off the plane. First thing he says to the general is, "I love the roll." So a French general and the roll. The instructor pilot's new call sign was croissant. French roll. Yeah. And by the way, he lost his instructor status because we're not supposed to be doing rolls. But you can do anything in this airplane. It's pretty cool. And one of the things that's pretty cool is terrain following. Believe it or not, from 20,000 feet, 25,000 feet, you can gauge terrain following. It's called TFR or TF. And it'll automatically fly you all the way down to 200 feet, level off, and fly on its own. You could put the back bombing system in automatic. It'll turn on its own. It'll bomb on its own. It'll do everything. You could all be passed out, and it's still going to do its mission. It's an awesome, awesome terrain following. Pretty cool system. Okay, when I first started flying the B-1, it was only nuclear weapons only. That's it. So we had to sit, they hated alert duty. Every 3rd week for 24 hours a day for 7 days, you're stuck on alert. You're stuck in an alert facility, and your plane is a couple hundred feet away, fully loaded, usually with 24 thermonuclear weapons. Pretty powerful airplane. So that was kind of the downside of alert until 1989 when the president decided only ICBMs and submarines are going to be on alert. No more bombers, so we all rejoiced. It was great. It was wonderful. And these are some of the things we carried at the time. Like I said, 24 gravity thermonuclear weapons, as well as we usually mixed and matched. So we carried these things called SRAMs, short-range attack missiles, nuclear-tipped. And we would use them as we went in. Of course, we trained to fly 200 feet, sole single penetrator into the Soviet Union, of course. And we would use these SRAMs as like guns to shoot ahead of us, shoot down defensive sites, surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, as we went in, so we could use our gravity bombs. So that's what I did most of my time. And then, lucky for us, we had another strategic arms reduction treaty with the Soviet Union. And everyone in the B-1 loved it. You know why? B-1s could not carry nuclear weapons anymore. It was great. we were going to transition to conventional weapons only. And Chino was one of 2 crews that was picked to do all the operational testing of conventional weapons. It was great. This airplane can carry 84 500-pound high explosive weapons internally and drop them all in less than 2 seconds. And by the way, we don't drop bombs. We're going too fast. Each one of them has these big, like, dynamite charges, 2 of them that eject the bombs. Because if you didn't, the bombs would fly with you and blow you up. Pretty awesome. 84 in less than 2 seconds. Now, back then, we could also carry mines, you know, could go mine a harbor, things like that. So, in the, let me see, what's the Gulf War? 91, the first Desert Storm. So in the late 80s, we were doing all this testing for conventional weapons. Desert Storm hit. We were still nuclear only, but we were in the process of doing this testing, and every B-1 crew member was upset because we didn't get to go to Desert Storm. My brother, who was a tail gunner on a B-52 at the time, keeps rubbing that in because he got to fly in Desert Storm. So I never did get to drop any weapons in anger, but the brunt of the work that's done today, and you'll see in this video, is from B-1s in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now they carry 2,000-pound JDAMs that you can have. Each one is individually targeted. It's amazing. You can go through and everyone's hitting a different tank, hitting a different target. These guys, it's amazing. They sit up in a box now in in these places because we have air supremacy. And the guy in the ground will say, hey, like some close air support, and they say, can you be over here? They'll go to afterburner, go mock, be there in a couple minutes and drop the bombs. It's pretty impressive. A good friend of mine, Fred Swan, his call sign was Duck. I found out afterwards at the last reunion, he came within less than 1 minute of dropping a 2,000-pounder on Saddam Hussein. Intel said he had just left the building. It was pretty impressive. Of course, we have in-flight refueling. We slow down to about a little under 400 miles an hour, so going pretty slow. We pull up behind this guy, and you're pretty close to them, and they're actually flying. There's wings on that boom, so that boom operator, of course, is literally flying that boom into our airplane and passing us gas. I think we can hold 200,000 pounds of gas, a lot of gas. And it's pretty cool rendezvousing with these guys. Now, the airplane, we call it, before I'm going to take questions, I'm going to show this video, but we call this airplane the Bone. The Air Force calls it the Lancer. The Lancer? That sounds like some fairy thing, So one day in Rapid City, the local TV station, this is true, I was watching TV, and normally when you say an airplane, like a B-47, you put B-47. Well, what do they put on TV? B-ONE. So we became the Bone from that moment on. And there's a famous rock and roll song, Bad to the Bone, of course, that's our song. And we started Fraternal Order of Bone Men way back when it was only men flying the airplane. And we still have the Fraternal Order of Bone Men, but we have 20% of our crew force now are women. And believe it or not, the only thing we had to do different is we had to put a little drape over the little teeny tiny bathroom area we have, which is really nothing more than an RV toilet with that blue fluid in it, you know what I mean? So that's all we had to do was add a drape for the females. But it's, like I said, it's about 20% of the crew force is women now. So if I'm going to do this correctly, put my glasses. I have a link on this slide. We tried it earlier, and it should go right to a YouTube video. This YouTube video is actually from a TV show called Modern Marvels. You might have seen it. Okay. It's going to talk a little bit about 9.5 minutes of about more of the detail of the bomber, show some cool pictures and things like that. And you're going to see the, I think it's the wing commander or group commander that talks at the end here. It was funny. When I was getting out of flying and going on the leadership track, this guy was just coming in. So it's kind of funny how you see these young guys, now they're full colonels. So it's pretty neat. All right, there's my cursor. It's in technology grade.
At Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, the airmen of the 28th Bomb Wing are gearing up to go supersonic once again. Their mission? To take out a runway and some buildings in southeastern Montana. With orders in hand, they make the commute to the flight line. Their extreme aircraft is a bomber that thinks it's a fighter. It's called the B-1B Lancer. The men call it the Bone. The B-1B bomber is 146 feet long, weighs approximately 440,000 pounds fully loaded, and can reach supersonic speeds of Mach 1.2. The four General Electric turbofan engines produce 30,000 pounds of thrust each, meaning the B-1 is powered by the equivalent of 3 F-35 fighter engines.
The B-1 is a great aircraft to fly. We have the speed and the capability to make our transition from high altitude to low altitude very quickly in a dive. We have the speed and the length to really just kind of try to burn.
1 hour into the mission, the crew's target is within striking distance. In the aft compartment, the offensive systems officer prepares to unleash the bomber's fearsome payload. A sensitive radar with ground-moving target tracking helps pinpoint the target for destruction.
We're looking at a road running basically north-south. There's our runway here. These right returns right there are the buildings that we'll be striking today. Right here, it's telling me I got 56 seconds to release. I got 3 2,000-pound weapons coming out from those buildings. Doors, forward and aft open. Right here, you see the doors open. 1 away, 2 away, 3 and 3 away. Doors coming closed. System safe, clear to maneuver.
In this training mission over the farm fields of Montana, the bombs are simulations. But another day, this same crew may repeat this methodical and deadly process for real. If that happens, the B-1B will bring an overwhelming payload to the battle. Its 3 massive bomb bays carry a flexible arsenal. This includes smart weapons, bombs and guided missiles that use global positioning data to precisely destroy targets. Over the Middle East, the crews often deploy guided bombs, called JDAMs.
Stand behind me here is the 180-inch rotary launcher, which is carrying the 2,000-pound Joint Direct Attack munition, and each bomber holds 3 per bay, which is a total of 24 GPS-guided munitions.
A single B-1B carries a weapons payload 8 times heavier than that carried by a B-17 during World War II. And like fast food customers, the Bone's weapons officers can have it their way.
It can be almost like a Burger King. You know, I'll take a 500-pounder with an instantaneous fuse. Please give me a 2,000-pounder with a 25-millisecond fuse. And while you're at it, you know, can you send me a burger and fries?
The B-1B continues to share mission duties with a relic of the Cold War, the B-52 bomber. They both carry a weapons payload in excess of 25 tons. But that's where the similarities end.
I like to describe them like cars. Your B-52 is like your grandfather's pickup truck. It's old, it's reliable, and it carries just about anything you can imagine to carry. The B-1 is the muscle car of the bomber force. It has power, it has speed, and it has a huge payload capability.
The B-1B can trace its muscle car beginnings to the early 1970s. The Air Force wanted to replace its aging B-52s with supersonic bombers that could quickly penetrate Soviet airspace with their nuclear arsenal. But since many politicians believed America's intercontinental ballistic missile program was a sufficient deterrent to the Soviets, they were convinced the proposed B-1A bomber was a colossal waste of money.
So the Air Force basically found itself in a very difficult position trying to sell this new heavy bomber, and I might mention very expensive heavy bomber, to Congress. But over a period of time they did succeed.
The B-1A bomber prototypes could fly at Mach 2.2. But even at twice the speed of sound, they couldn't outrun numerous mechanical problems and caused overruns.
And so the Carter administration, looking around to make cuts, they decided to cut back on the B-1A. And so the B-1A went away. Now, what people recognize is that the B-1A was really too good to go away.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
In 1981, when Ronald Reagan assumed the presidency, he immediately vowed to restore the punch to the U.S. military.
Of the United States.
That included reviving the B-1 program. Renamed the B-1B, a single bomber could deliver a payload of 24 B-61 nuclear bombs with a destructive capacity nearly 500 times that of the Hiroshima blast. But when the new bomber entered service in the late 1980s, it faced a sudden identity crisis.
Well, as time has passed, and of course the Soviet threat has collapsed, effectively the Air Force was faced with a dilemma. What do we do with the B-1 bomber?
Since America no longer needed a long-range nuclear bomber, in the late 1990s, the Air Force began upgrading the B-1B to carry conventional weapons. Over the past decade, the retooled B-1B has become a workhorse of the U.S. bomber fleet. In 6 years of operations over Afghanistan and later in Iraq, B-1Bs have flown more than 2,200 sorties and dropped more than 7,400 bombs, far surpassing the B-52 and the B-2 stealth bombers. But the B-1B's greatest weapon may be its extreme agility, meaning the crews can sometimes avoid using bombs and still make a major impact on hostile forces below. They sometimes buzz the enemy by streaking at supersonic speeds as low as 200 feet off the ground. The sonic effect of the B-1B engines on the human ear is similar to a large conventional bomb blast. The key to this highly dangerous flight path is the bomber's autopilot. It employs a system called TF, or terrain following. When TF is engaged, the aircraft's radar scans forward up to 10 miles to create a map of the terrain. The plane uses the map to skim above the contours of the terrain without input from the pilot. Crews often use this low-level ground-hugging feature to awesome effect.
Well, a show of force is really just to say, we're here, and a lot of times you can disperse the enemy or scare them into hiding and run them off before we have to use any kinetic tools like a weapon. Collateral damage is very, very important to us, and we minimize that to the maximum extent.
Whether it's a show force sortie or a tactical bomb strike, the B-1B pushes the limits of what a bomber can accomplish.
Its capabilities make it extreme, the power makes it extreme, its flexibility makes it extreme. And if I were an enemy of the United States, the last thing I'd want to see is a B-1 coming at me.
Sound of freedom.
Yes. Very impressive.
I can just figure out how to get out of this. All right. Good. Hey, I want to say a couple things I noticed when I was watching that is, one thing I want to tell you is, during terrain following, if we had any kind of a problem, you get a tone in your headset, a really high tone, and you get a 2.4 G zoom to the sky right away. So it's kind of a kick in the pants. Well, in training, especially with new pilots, they have to practice this. So they're going to go up to IFR altitude, they're going to push the airplane over to be safe. So in the back, we turn off a radar channel or something to cause the TF to fail. I was flying with the squadron commander at the time. Lieutenant Colonel was right next to me, and we had a young co-pilot in training. He goes over there, we nod at each other, turn off the radar, and all of a sudden you get this nee, and then a 2.4 G, pull up, and all of a sudden the co-pilot, he's new, he's in training, he just goes over negative G's. All of a sudden we have this little water container, and where the water is, it just starts floating between me and the colonel. And when we got to 1G, I was dry, he was wet. And he said, stay at IFR altitude. He unstrapped and he went out and he chewed him out. I'm serious, I was right there. They get all these negative G's all the time. It's pretty cool things floating around, Oh, and another thing, I wanted to tell a quick story, I think I have time, about a UFO story. This is a true story. It wasn't my crew. We had 2 squadrons at Ellsworth, the 77th Bomb Squadron and the 37th Bomb Squadron. Well, this was a story I heard directly from the crew that did this, 77th Bomb Squadron. We do a lot of low-level training in Arizona, La Junta bomb plot, and at night, I think we were restricted to 1,000 feet low level. And I forget the main road, I-20, I-10, whatever the main road is, we cross it. So these guys, I don't know how they think of this. So they tune in their high frequency radio to the CB channel, okay? And so we're counting down, not we, I wasn't there, but they're counting down to crossing the road, right? And they said, pilot, I want you to stroke all 4 afterburners when we cross this road. Sure enough, going to stroke all 4 afterburners, and the CB goes crazy. Oh my gosh, I just saw me a UFO! I-10, I was going eastbound, and it just goes on and on and on. Because you got 4 30-foot flames coming out of the back of your airplane, Oh man, that story went on forever. So anyhow, those are just student things. All right, I'll open it up if we got time for questions. If anybody has a question about anything.
So is B-1 still flying now?
Oh yes, doing a majority of the bombing right now, absolutely.
So what I saw the other day is possible. I saw a KC-135 or K refueling.
Right, you could have seen
appeared
it.
to be a B-1.
Oh, could be. Yeah, I mean, you can see the design. It would have the wings forward, but
Yeah.
I think we have 66 of them still. We only built 100 of them. I think there's still 66 in use.
Yeah,
So.
that was Thursday.
And I think we're down to 17 B-2s.
Okay.
Oh, and here's another thing about these B-52s, which I flew. I flew a G model, which was a little older than the ones that are flying now. The ones that are flying now, the H models, they're young. They were just built in 1960. Okay, I was built in 1958, and I flew G models. And I remember 602. If the tail number ended in a 6, it was built in 57. If it started in 0, it was built in 58. If it was 2, it was built in 59. So I always go out and see if I'm older than the airplane. So they're pretty old. They're proposed to fly in another 50 years. The B-52, 50 years.
The oldest serving airframe, I think, in the military right now.
I believe it. It's
So I flew 135, they were 56.
good. Well, now, but and all these airplanes, they've been gutted. Like the KC's got our model's got these big, CFM 56 engines. So it's pretty cool. Yes.
What's the difference in the missions and capability of the B-2 and the B-1?
The B-2 is very similar to the B-52. It's slow, high altitude, but they all can carry now these precision weapons, JDAMs that you saw. The B-2 carries a little bit less than the B-1 can carry, but with the JDAMs, it's great. They can go through, like I said, just knock out all different targets with as many weapons as they're carrying. But it's mostly high-level crews, air refueling. Both of those airplanes, that's what they do now. Those two also have a nuclear commitment. So they still train low level, but in the conflicts that we have with air supremacy, they don't fly low level. But they can go low level. Yes?
If they do scrap the A-10s like is proposed, is the B-1 the airplane that's supposed to cover that role?
Well, it is covering that role right now. And I don't know if you saw in the news, but it looks like they may have had some friendly fire about 2 weeks ago. They called it a B-1 and had some friendly fire. So if they use it for that, they're going to have a lot more coordination than what they show. This is a big airplane. You know, an A-10 is highly maneuverable. It's made out of, although we have titanium, the tub is completely titanium. You could fly with one wing in an A-10. I don't know why the Army would ever suggest that the Air Force get rid of the A-10. I have no idea. When I was in the Pentagon in the 90s, they wanted to get rid of it. But they don't have anything to replace it with, so I'm confused. I don't know. Yes, sir?
Do the Soviets have anything either now or on the boards that you know of?
For
like
what?
this?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Well, right after we built the B-1, funny how they built the Blackjack bomber. It looks exactly the same, has almost the same capabilities, except for, unlike us, they don't really have the infrastructure to keep them flying. So most of their airplanes just sit around. Matter of fact, when the Cold War ended, most of their airplanes, their pilots averaged something 1.3 hours a month flying. You know, unbelievable. So, yes, ma'am.
About your hiking, how many pairs of shoes did you go through?
She asked how many shoes did I go through hiking 2,200 miles. I went through 3 pairs, but I should have had 4 pairs. Because the shoes that I had could only make it about 700 miles. So the last week when I'm waiting for my shipment to come in the shoes, I literally walked with no soles the last week. And I was averaging about 120 miles a week, so it was pretty rough, very rough. Yeah, good question. Any other questions about anything? Yes, sir.
Do you still have connections with the Pentagon? You talk to people back there? If you do, you're not active now, so what's the general overall military attitude of what's going on today and how they're bringing down the military?
Well, we went through this once before in the big RIF, reduction in force, when Clinton was in. And I tell you, we got rid of a lot of good guys, younger guys, captains. It was very unfortunate. And right now, I think we're at the lowest levels since before World War II, is what I recall. I don't know. You know, my personal opinion doesn't really matter. But as a concerned citizen, you know, peace is our profession. Well, guess what? You can't have peace unless you got these weapons for deterrence. That's my own personal opinion. And no, I don't really have any more connections. I mean, I still have 3 or 4 close friends that are general officers, but I don't talk to them on a regular basis, only at reunions and things like that, so. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I remember when I was a youngster, I lived in Topeka, where Forbes was.
Yes.
Is. And I used to go drive past Forbes, and I'd see that big, sack peace is our profession, which always seemed like almost an oxymoron.
It is, yeah.
But if you understood what they did.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I did a Discovery Channel video back in '89 about the B-1, and I made a comment. I said, if we were ever have to go to war, nuclear war, we would make sure that we're going to do it well. You know why? Because our base has been targeted by the Soviet Union, and my family's not going to be there when I get back. Think about it. You know, every SAC base is going to be targeted by incoming ICBMs. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got my wife's cousin's son is a Air Force forward observer.
Oh, yeah.
And he's second enlistment. And I'm curious, when these guys are assigned missions, it's the forward observer that's communicating with you on the target.
That's right. Well, they're called combat controllers.
Right.
You know, they're some of the first guys in. And they get on a horn, and they're the ones that are telling us where to be, what time to be, what to drop.
He's an E5.
That's right. That's right. Oh yeah, or younger.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we have. You know, I was commander of one of the about 1,000 troops at a time in basic training.
Right.
You know, so these young kids, they're working on $300 million jets. Only in the Air Force, I don't want to say only, but out of the branches, the Air Force is the one where the officers go to war, for the most part,
right.
Where the other ones, an officer leads the enlisted into war. So we give our enlisted folks that work in our airplanes and things a lot of responsibility right away. it's great. Our guy's, fixing our jet engine mechanic. He's 18 years old. He's working on a $300 million jet.
Tell us about your second career.
Well, it's not really a career, but for the last, I think, 7 years, I've been working in elementary school in Lawrence, Kansas, and I work with students with special needs. So I either work. And I don't call it a career because the amount of money they pay me barely pays for me to get to work. And I'm not kidding. But it's so rewarding. I work with autistic kids, mentally retarded kids, cerebral palsy kids. For me, that's what life's about, is kind of, really helping out others. So I love it. It's just amazing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we had a speaker, he's talking about being in Afghanistan. He said, talking about B-1B coming in as ground support. He said that, they had a group out there that was being attacked, and they called in air support, and the only thing around was the B-1B because we're out of bombs. He goes, well, can you do anything? They go, well, we come in low level. He came in about 200 feet over, and that was it. Firefight was over. They were gone.
I tell you how loud this airplane is. Early on at air shows, we could do really almost anything. We could come into supersonic. We could, before they settled these new rules. And friends of mine were up at Long Beach, and the rumor is they set off between 3,000 and 6,000 car alarms. We did a supersonic pass. Everybody's. So yeah, it's we used to be able to do all this kind of crazy stuff, and then of course as the airplane. Now the airplane was just 28 years old or something. So now, of course, we don't want to put too much stress on the airplane. You can't do all this fancy stuff at air shows anymore. But
No more rules.
no more rules. Yeah. So I was in it when it was cool. We just do that, doing touch and goes. The pilots would be up doing. We call them Captain Atomics. It was the coolest thing. Although I do hate touch and goes in the back. All I'm doing is altitude, airspeed, altitude, airspeed. But they love it. So, yes, sir.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I had a chance to hear General Tibbetts, and you said you had a connection.
Yeah, General Tibbetts, of course, famous General Tibbetts, his crew dropped the atomic bomb. Well, his grandson, when I was in Abilene teaching new guys to fly, he came through, and now he just made Brigadier General.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
Is he still a white man, or?
I don't know if he's there anymore.
He's not a white.
I don't think he's there anymore. Yeah.
But he has flown the Boeing, the B-52, the Boeing, the Buff, and the...
Oh, did he go to B-52s? He did this B-52
He's
time?
flown all three.
That's cool. And I was, I don't know, I was telling John, I think on the ride over here, my goal at first was to fly all three airplanes. And I had it on my dream sheet to fly the B-2 because at the time, the B-2 had 3 crew members, 2 pilots and a navigator, weapons systems officer. I said, cool, I'll be one of the first guys to do that. And about a year before they started production, they got rid of the navigator. So we had to train these pilots how to navigate and how to drop bombs. So it was kind of cool,
There was one aircraft that I know that McNamara got rid of. That when I was a kid, I built a model of it, and I've only seen one, and that was at the Air Museum at OFFUTT.
Which one is that?
Melbourne, the Hustler.
Oh, the B-58 Hustler?
B-58 Hustler. I love that plane.
I thought you were going to say the XB-70. You ever see that thing?
I've seen it.
Oh, man. Awesome. And by the way, we're pretty close. If you haven't been to the SAC Air Museum, it's just on the west side of Omaha.
Oh.
Well, I don't think, did he move it to Bellevue? It used to be in Bellevue. Now it's about 45 minutes west. And it's a great museum, especially if you got young kids and you want to get them interested in aviation. I highly recommend it. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me, and thank you.
You're not through yet.
Chino. I'm sorry.
On behalf of the wing, I just want to say thank you for your service and for your presentation here today, and for the work you continue to do in Lawrence. I didn't know you did that. That's very impressive. I think that's great, having done a little of that myself.
Oh, great.
So And also, we want to give you a small token of our appreciation. I don't think I have to explain to you what a challenge coin is.
No, you don't.
Okay. Just make sure if ever you run into these guys in a bar, you better have your coin with you.
Is there any B1 guys here? Because I'm ready. We also have a coin. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.